if you have ever studied anything about the history of the NFL, or you're old enough to remember, Deacon Jones is flat out the greatest pass rusher in the history of the NFL. He'd be the first one to tell you that. The only pass rusher that I would put on a level with Deacon Jones who's ever lived is Lawrence Taylor. Deacon Jones, the preeminent member of the fearsome foursome, okay, 3 of which are dead, but they did not keep stats for sacks. Deacon Jones told me that he had 30 sacks in a season. He invented the term sack on the quarterback. Very colorful figure, as you know. Played for the Rams, played for the Chargers, ended his career with the Redskins because he was a George Allen guy. Really, you talk to anybody who's around the NFL from those days, they'll tell you nobody ever was better than Deacon Jones. I mean, you're talking about just pure pass rusher. Great defensive end. George Allen called him the greatest defensive end in the modern era of the NFL. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, you remember the fearsome force, and you might remember him from the Odd Couple, where they're shaving him, and, now you're speaking Deacon with, there's an old Odd Couple routine. I don't know if anyone has that anywhere, but you might see it somewhere tonight. He did an Odd Couple with Jack Klugman and Tony Randall, and it was pretty funny. It was, Oscar was doing a commercial, and Felix was in it with Oscar. It was pretty funny, but it just showed you Deacon Jones. And listen, if you're old enough to remember the fearsome foursome, then you know of Deacon Jones, and he was the preeminent defensive end and as great a pass rusher as anybody was in the history of the NFL. Played at South Carolina State, then he went to Mississippi Vocational School, graduated there, and became this incredible player. I mean, he was just. That was it. He was Deacon Jones. He was NFL Defensive Player of the Year 2 years running. He's on every team that you could ever be on. There's nothing he does. There's no award as a defensive player he didn't get. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, he was, one of the great players of all time. There's nothing else to be said. I mean, and, played, and again, they list this, somehow they went back and took his sack totals, and they gave him 12, 20, 22, 19, 18, 26, 24. Now, these are unofficial. They gave him sack numbers, again, unofficial. He had, supposedly in 1967, 26 sacks in 14 games. He told me he had over 30 sacks in a season. He had supposedly 50 sacks in 2 years. He was unbelievable. And he was part of the legendary fearsome foursome, which, Rosie Greer, Lamar Lundy, Merlin Olsen, maybe the best defensive line of all time. I guess maybe Minnesota would quibble with that. But, one of the great lines, one of the great personalities. You've seen him on the Super Bowl. He'd come and go on the Super Bowl thing every year. He was always on our show and everything. Really revolutionized the position. Was the great modern defensive end player. And like I said, the only pass rusher I'd ever put in the same level is Lawrence Taylor. So David Deacon Jones dead at the age of 74. Way too soon. Back after this.